By the time Natalie Parker realized the stranger whose face she was currently holding belonged to Enzo Romano, it was already far too late to behave like a woman with functioning judgment. Both of her hands were on his cheeks. Not one, both. Her fingers rested against the sharp line of his jaw. Her thumbs were dangerously close to his mouth, and she was standing so close that the front of her burgundy gown nearly brushed his dark shirt. Unfortunately, that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what she'd just whispered. "Act like my boyfriend." The stranger stared down at her. Nothing. No smile, no confusion, no immediate refusal. Just a long, silent, deeply uncomfortable stare. Natalie swallowed. Perhaps she should have selected someone friendlier, someone shorter, someone whose face didn't suggest he had personally fired several emotions for poor performance. Behind him, 3 large men in black suits had stopped moving. One held a glass halfway toward his mouth. Another looked as though he'd forgotten how blinking worked. The third slowly turned toward the man Natalie was holding and whispered, "Boss?" Natalie heard him. She did, but she had much bigger problems. Because approximately 20 feet behind her, Julian Cross was approaching. With her, Camille Laurent, tall, blonde, elegant, gold gown. The woman Julian had begun publicly dating almost immediately after spending 6 months telling Natalie he wasn't ready for commitment. Apparently, commitment had simply required a smaller dress size and European cheekbones. Natalie's jaw tightened. No, absolutely not. She had spent 6 weeks planning this gala, 6 weeks coordinating florists, caterers, security, entertainment, seating plans, wealthy people with allergies they remembered only after the menu had been finalized, and one donor who had demanded that his table be moved because the chandelier above it gave him financially negative energy. Natalie Parker had survived all of that. She was not going to spend tonight explaining her relationship status to Julian Cross, so she tightened her hands slightly around the stranger's face. His eyebrows lowered. Natalie whispered urgently, "Please." Still nothing. She glanced over her shoulder. Julian was getting closer. 10 seconds, maybe less. Natalie looked back at the stranger. He really was unfairly handsome. Dark, wavy hair, strong jaw beneath her hands. Broad shoulders stretching a deep brown shirt that should probably have required a permit. Expensive watch. Tall enough that Natalie had to tilt her chin dramatically just to make eye contact. He looked like the sort of man expensive furniture was designed around. Perfect. All he had to do was stand there and look romantic. How difficult could that possibly be? Natalie leaned closer. Look obsessed with me. Behind him, somebody choked. Actually choked. A harsh cough exploded from the man holding the drink. Another bodyguard slapped his back. The stranger's eyes flicked briefly toward them, then returned to Natalie. She smiled through gritted teeth. "You can do that, right?" His voice finally came, low, controlled, dangerously calm. "You want me to look obsessed?" "Yes, with you." Natalie blinked. "Well, preferably not with the floral arrangement." His eyes moved toward the enormous white roses beside them. Then back to her. Natalie saw it. A tiny movement at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Almost. Excellent. Progress. Good. That. His eyebrows drew together. That? The almost smile. Behind him, the man who had choked made another strangled sound. Natalie pointed one finger toward the stranger's mouth, while still holding the other side of his face. "Do that again when he gets here." The stranger stared at her finger, then at her. Natalie suddenly realized she was giving facial expression instructions to a grown man she'd known for approximately 14 seconds. That seemed bold. Unfortunately, Julian was now nearly beside them. No retreat. Natalie's pride had already boarded the train. She was going with it. "Please," she whispered again. 30 seconds. That's all I need." Something in the stranger's expression changed. Perhaps it was the desperation, perhaps curiosity. Perhaps he had simply decided his evening needed entertainment. Whatever the reason, his hand moved, slowly, then settled around Natalie's waist. Her entire brain stopped. Oh! She had asked him to participate. She had not expected him to be good at it. His palm rested firmly against the curve of her waist. Not inappropriate, not hesitant, just confident enough that Natalie suddenly became very aware of exactly where his hand was. She looked up. The stranger looked down, and somehow he now appeared amused. Natalie's eyes narrowed. "Don't get carried away." His voice remained quiet. "You approached me." "Yes." "You grabbed my face." "Yes." "You instructed me to look obsessed." "Yes." "And I'm getting carried away?" Natalie opened her mouth, closed it. Annoying. He had logic. She disliked that in emergency boyfriends. Then Julian reached them. Natalie. There it was. That voice. The slightly surprised, slightly concerned, slightly patronizing tone Natalie remembered far too well. She turned, and instantly smiled so brightly that her cheeks nearly filed a complaint. "Julian." Camille stood beside him. Beautiful. Perfect. Smiling politely. Natalie genuinely had nothing against her. That was unfortunate. Hating innocent people was much easier. Julian's eyes moved toward the stranger beside Natalie, then toward the hand at her waist, then back. Something passed through his expression. Surprise. Good. Good. Natalie's plan was working. "This is unexpected," Julian said. Natalie smiled wider. "Life is full of miracles." The stranger's fingers shifted slightly against her waist. Was that amusement? Natalie didn't look. She could not look. Julian glanced between them. "Aren't you going to introduce us?" "Right. Yes. Introductions. Important social concept." Natalie turned toward her emergency boyfriend. She knew absolutely nothing about him. Nothing. Not his name. Not his occupation. Not whether he had children. Not whether those men behind him were friends, employees, or an unusually formal book club. Brilliant. She had selected a boyfriend without checking the specifications. Julian waited. Natalie's smile became painful. "This is..." She looked at the stranger. He looked back. "Help. Please help." His eyes told her he knew exactly what was happening, and the terrible man was enjoying it. Natalie narrowed hers. If he allowed her to die here, she would haunt him professionally. Finally, the stranger offered his hand toward Julian. "Enzo." Natalie nearly sagged with relief. Enzo. Great. Simple. Handsome name. Very believable. Julian shook his hand. "Julian Cross." "I know." Julian paused. Natalie did too. "Interesting." Julian smiled cautiously. "And how exactly do you know Natalie?" Natalie's brain immediately began searching for lies. "Gym? No." She hadn't voluntarily entered a gym since one had tried charging her a cancellation fee. "Coffee shop? Too ordinary. Mutual friend? Dangerous." Julian knew most of them. "Church? Absolutely unbelievable, after the amount of profanity Natalie had used while organizing this gala." Then Enzo answered. "We're together." Natalie slowly turned her head. "Well, yes. Technically, that was the assignment. But he said it with such calm certainty that for half a second, even Natalie wondered whether they'd somehow been dating without her knowledge. Julian's eyebrows rose. "Together?" Enzo looked down at Natalie. And there it was, the look she'd requested. Warm enough to be intimate, possessive enough to be convincing, controlled enough to make her stomach do something deeply unprofessional. Natalie forgot how breathing worked. Then Enzo said, "For a while." "For a while?" Her eyes widened. Nobody had approved mythology. Julian looked at her. "You never mentioned him." Natalie laughed, too loudly. "I'm private now." Enzo's thumb moved once against her waist. She knew he was laughing internally. She could feel it. Julian glanced toward Camille, then back. How long is a while? Natalie opened her mouth. Enzo answered first. Long enough. Natalie stared at him. Apparently the man specialized in uselessly confident answers. Julian smiled thinly. You always hated mysterious men. Natalie's expression tightened. Before she could respond, Enzo looked at Julian. She hates champagne too. Natalie froze. Julian blinked. Enzo continued calmly. Unless somebody puts strawberries in it, which she thinks improves something already disappointing. Natalie's mouth opened. How? He looked toward the bar. She prefers sparkling water with lime. Her eyes widened further. Then he nodded toward the ballroom doors. She also checks the west entrance every 4 minutes because the floral vendor arrived late, and she doesn't trust him to leave on schedule. Natalie stared. Julian stared. Even Camille looked impressed. Enzo's gaze returned to Natalie. And she hasn't eaten dinner because she's been working since 3. Natalie's mouth closed. Oh, that was specific. Far too specific. Julian's smile slipped. Because those weren't generic boyfriend facts. Enzo had noticed her. In one evening, from across a ballroom, this complete stranger had apparently paid more attention to Natalie than Julian had during the final 6 months of their relationship. That realization was unexpectedly satisfying and unexpectedly dangerous, because Natalie's fake plan had suddenly become too convincing. She looked up at Enzo. He gave her the faintest lift of one eyebrow. You're welcome. Arrogant man. Julian cleared his throat. Well? His eyes dropped toward Enzo's arm. Then back to Natalie. You seem happy. There it was, the phrase Natalie had dreaded. Except now, it didn't hurt. Mostly because Enzo was still holding her. Also because Julian looked considerably less confident than he'd expected to. Natalie smiled. I am. For once, the words felt true. Not because of Enzo, obviously. She had known the man for approximately 1 cocktail garnish, but because she'd finally realized something. She did not want Julian back, not even slightly. She simply hated the version of herself he'd made her feel like. Too much, too loud, too curvy, too opinionated. Too difficult to fit into the polished little future he'd wanted. And now here she was, in a burgundy gown she loved, running an event filled with people who trusted her professionally, while an outrageously handsome stranger looked at her like Julian's opinion wasn't worth the decorative toothpick in an olive. Wonderful. She should fake date Mafia-shaped strangers more often. Camille complimented Natalie's event. Natalie thanked her sincerely. Julian looked vaguely disappointed that no emotional collapse had occurred. Then, one of his acquaintances called his name. He excused himself. Camille followed. Julian glanced back once. Enzo didn't move his hand. Julian stopped looking. Natalie waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then she exhaled so hard her entire body relaxed. Oh, thank God. She removed her hands from Enzo's face, then gently pushed against his chest. Okay, he looked down. Okay? Performance over. Nothing. Natalie smiled. You did very well. Still nothing. She patted his chest. Excellent work. One of the men behind him made a strange sound. Natalie glanced over. They were all staring. Why were they still staring? She looked at Enzo. His hand remained around her waist. Natalie looked down at it. Then up. You can let go now. He didn't. Her eyebrows rose. Enzo. Interesting how quickly she'd become comfortable using his name. His expression was calm. Too calm. 30 seconds? Yes. That was your agreement. Yes. You used approximately 90. Natalie stared. Are you billing me? For the first time, the man behind Enzo actually laughed. A short burst. He immediately turned it into a cough when Enzo looked back. Natalie smiled. You have funny friends. No one answered. Enzo looked at her. They're not my friends. The man who laughed looked personally offended. Natalie glanced at them again. Employees? Yes. Security? A pause. Yes. Natalie nodded. That made sense. Enzo had expensive man energy, perhaps CEO, celebrity, political donor, something irritatingly important. She looked at the nearest guard. So when you said boss earlier, 3 men became very still. Natalie pointed between them. You meant him. Silence. Enzo's gaze remained on her. Natalie slowly turned. Why did that sound ominous? Before anyone could answer, Marco Bellini approached. He was still fighting amusement. Unsuccessfully. Boss. Natalie looked at Enzo. Then Marco. Then Enzo. Everybody calls you that? Enough, people. That answer was suspiciously unhelpful. Natalie crossed her arms. Or tried to. Enzo's hand was still around her waist. She looked down. He finally released her. Immediately, she noticed the absence. That was ridiculous. Good. Space. Professionalism. Reality. She stepped away. Thank you for rescuing my dignity. Enzo's eyes moved briefly toward where Julian had disappeared. You didn't need rescuing. Natalie stopped. There was no flirtation in the sentence. Just observation. Something warm flickered inside her. She immediately buried it. Fine. Thank you for assisting with my petty emotional emergency. More accurate. Much. She turned toward Marco. Please tell your boss he's very convincing. Marco's expression became extraordinary. Enzo looked at him. Marco looked at Natalie. Then at Enzo. Oh, I don't think convincing is going to be the problem. Natalie frowned. What does that mean? Nothing. Enzo said Marco's name. Only once. Marco immediately found the ceiling interesting. Natalie narrowed her eyes. These men were strange. She reached for the all-access credential hanging around her neck. Right, work, the event, her actual responsibilities. She had an 11-minute delay in her schedule because she'd temporarily lost her mind over an ex-boyfriend. Time to return to sanity. She looked at Enzo. Again, thank you. He nodded. Natalie stepped backward, then remembered one thing. She pointed. If Julian returns, we're still together. Enzo's eyebrow lifted. Are we? Until he leaves. How romantic. Don't become difficult. Marco turned away again. Natalie saw it. What? Nothing. She shook her head, then hurried toward the ballroom. Behind her, Marco remained silent for exactly 4 seconds. Then he looked at Enzo. Look obsessed with me? Enzo slowly turned his head. Marco's smile vanished. Almost. I heard nothing. You repeated it. Memory failure. Enzo stared. Marco looked toward Natalie, disappearing between guests. Then back. I've known you 15 years. Enzo said nothing. In 15 years, I've watched men ask permission to sit in chairs you weren't using. Still nothing. She grabbed your face. Enzo's gaze returned to Natalie. Marco noticed. Interesting. And you're smiling. Enzo looked at him. I am not. You are internally. That isn't visible. It is to me. Enzo's expression promised consequences. Marco stopped. Temporarily. Then Enzo's attention shifted. Toward Natalie's back. More specifically, toward the credential hanging from her neck. A black and gold access card. Event management. Level 4. Enzo's eyes narrowed. Marco saw the change instantly. What? Enzo didn't answer. One of his security men approached from the service corridor. His expression was no longer amused. Boss. The tone changed everything. Enzo turned. The guard leaned closer. We've got a problem. Marco straightened. What? The man lowered his voice. Someone just used a level 4 event credential at the west service door. Enzo's gaze moved back toward Natalie. Her badge, still around her neck. Marco followed his stare, then frowned. Copied? Looks like it. The humor disappeared. Not completely, but enough. Enzo's private meeting suite was located behind that corridor. Only employees with elevated access could reach it. Natalie's credential was one of them. Which meant someone had copied her access, or someone wanted it to look like Natalie had entered that corridor. Enzo's expression hardened. Marco glanced across the ballroom. Natalie was speaking to a caterer now, completely unaware, laughing, holding a clipboard, probably arguing about napkins. Marco lowered his voice. She know anything? No. You sure? Enzo looked at him. Marco raised one hand. Fair. Too early. No assumptions. Then another guard stepped forward. We also lost sight of Carlo's courier. That was different. Enzo's jaw tightened. He had come to the gala for one reason. Not champagne. Not donors. Certainly not because he expected a curvy event coordinator to grab him by the face and request emergency romance. For 3 months, someone inside the Romano organization had been leaking private shipping schedules. Not enough to destroy anything. Just enough to make certain rivals appear unusually lucky. Tonight, Enzo expected the traitor's courier to make contact. They'd tracked one possible intermediary into the event, and now, that man had disappeared through a service corridor using Natalie's credential. Marco looked toward her again. That's unfortunate. Enzo didn't respond. Because Natalie had just become part of something she didn't understand. And if whoever copied her badge realized she had been standing intimately beside Enzo Romano, they might assume she had given him information, or that he had given her something. Either way, she had unknowingly walked into the middle of a dangerous problem, and she still didn't know who Enzo really was. Natalie was halfway through explaining to a waiter that table 17 required 3 vegetarian meals, not 7, when a shadow fell across her clipboard. She looked up. Enzo. Again. He had somehow appeared without making noise. That should be illegal for a man his size. Natalie blinked. Julian isn't here. I know. Then why are you following me? I'm not. She looked behind him. 3 security men. Marco. All watching. Natalie looked back. You travel in packs. Enzo ignored that. Where has your badge been tonight? Natalie glanced down. On me. All night? Yes. Did anyone borrow it? No. Did anyone photograph it? Natalie frowned. What kind of questions are these? Answer. There it was. The voice. The one that made the men around him straighten. Natalie's eyebrows rose. Interesting. The stranger had become bossy. She leaned slightly closer. You were much nicer when you were my boyfriend. Marco turned his head. One guard looked down. Enzo's eyes narrowed. Natalie smiled sweetly. What? He seemed to consider several responses, chose none. Your credential was used 10 minutes ago. Natalie's smile vanished. What? At the West Service entrance. She immediately looked down at the badge around her neck. Impossible. I've had it the entire night. I know. Natalie looked up sharply. How did he know? Then she remembered the men. Security. Of course. Someone could have copied it. Her event-planning brain switched on instantly. No panic. Details. She checked the time. Asked which door, which reader, exact minute. Marco answered. 9:17. West Service Corridor. Natalie's brow furrowed. That door shouldn't even be active. Enzo's expression sharpened. Why? Because the fire safety inspection flagged the hinge this morning. Marco looked at the guard. The guard looked confused. Natalie continued. I had venue management disable badge access until maintenance signs off tomorrow. Enzo stared at her. So how was it opened? Good question. She turned. Started walking. Enzo caught her wrist. Not hard, but enough to stop her. Natalie looked at his hand, then at him. What? You're not going there. She stared. This is my event. There may be someone inside that corridor. Yes. That's generally why one investigates. Marco's mouth twitched. Enzo's expression did not. I'll investigate. Natalie folded her arms. You don't even know the building. I know enough. You didn't know the west door was disabled. Silence. Natalie smiled. Point for her. Enzo looked toward Marco. Marco was suddenly very interested in the ballroom. Natalie continued. There are 6 service exits, 2 freight elevators, 3 storage passages, and 1 ridiculous linen closet. that connects to Ballroom C because somebody redesigned this building while drunk. Enzo listened. Your men won't know which one matters. That he couldn't argue with. Natalie noticed. Exactly. Enzo looked down at her. Natalie looked up. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Enzo sighed. Stay beside me. She blinked. Excuse me? Beside me. Natalie's eyebrows climbed. You became very commanding after the fake relationship. His eyes held hers. You wanted convincing. That doesn't include kidnapping my schedule. No kidnapping. Good. A pause. Yet. Natalie stared. Marco choked again. She pointed at Enzo. That was almost funny. It wasn't. You're learning. I wasn't trying. Even better. Then she started toward the service corridor. Enzo followed. His men followed him. Natalie looked over her shoulder at the formation. This was ridiculous. She had begun the evening with a clipboard. Now she appeared to have acquired a private military unit. They crossed behind the ballroom. Guests barely noticed. Natalie pushed through a staff door. The noise of the gala disappeared behind them. Service hallway, white walls, muted lighting, stacks of folded linens. No guests. Natalie's heels clicked against the floor. She walked fast. Enzo remained beside her. His men spread behind. The contrast should have been hilarious. Curvy event coordinator in an elegant burgundy gown, leading 5 intimidating men through a corridor, while complaining under her breath about whoever had moved her catering crates. Then Natalie stopped. Enzo nearly walked into her. She held up one hand. Wait. Everyone froze. Enzo looked at her. Natalie pointed. A floral cart stood near the end of the corridor. White roses, greenery, gold ribbon. Nothing unusual. Except, that cart doesn't belong here. Marco frowned. It's flowers. Natalie looked offended. I know it's flowers. She moved closer. Enzo caught her elbow. Stay. She ignored him just enough to lean forward. The West ballroom arrangements use white roses and eucalyptus. Marco looked at the cart. These are white roses. No eucalyptus. Silence. Natalie pointed. And the ribbons are gold. So? Our floral team uses champagne. Marco stared. Natalie stared back. Yes, there is a difference. I didn't say anything. Your face did. Enzo almost smiled. Natalie saw. There. He immediately stopped. We're working. You smiled. No. Your face has witnesses. Marco nodded before thinking. Enzo looked at him. Marco reconsidered loyalty. Natalie crouched slightly beside the cart. There was a tray underneath. One black catering jacket. Wrong. Flower carts didn't carry catering uniforms. She looked toward Enzo. His amusement vanished. A sound came from farther down the hallway. Metal. Something closing. Enzo moved instantly. One arm across Natalie's waist, pulled her behind him. The motion was so fast, she barely understood it. His bodyguards moved ahead. Natalie found herself looking at Enzo's back. Broad, still, protective. This felt very different from the ballroom. No acting, no jealous ex, no fake relationship. Something was genuinely wrong. Her heartbeat changed. A man appeared briefly near the service exit, then ran. Enzo's men chased. Marco remained. Natalie instinctively stepped forward. Enzo blocked her. Stay! She looked around his shoulder. I need to see who... No, Enzo, Natalie. That was the first time he had said her name like that. Low. Firm. It did something extremely irritating to her stomach. Wrong moment. She glared upward. You don't get to use my name like punctuation. Marco turned away. Enzo looked down. For one absurd second, in the middle of a security incident, he looked almost amused again. Then one guard returned. The man had escaped through the loading dock, but he'd dropped something. A small black drive. Enzo took it. Natalie stared. What is that? No answer. She looked between them. Suddenly, her emergency fake boyfriend seemed considerably less like a random wealthy stranger. The black suits, the security. The way everyone obeyed him, the way one man had called him boss, the way the hallway had transformed the moment danger appeared. Natalie's expression changed. Okay. Enzo looked at her. Okay, what? She pointed toward him. Who are you? Marco's lips pressed together. Enzo studied Natalie. She could see him deciding how much truth to give. That irritated her immediately. No. His eyebrow moved. No what? No mysterious silence. Natalie placed both hands on her hips. You don't get to do the dramatic stare after I was nearly blamed for someone entering a restricted corridor. Enzo said nothing. Name. You know it. Full name. Silence. Marco looked toward the floor. Natalie slowly turned toward him. You. Marco looked innocent. Me? Yes. Why is everyone behaving like he owns oxygen? Marco's expression became dangerously close to laughter. Enzo's eyes narrowed. Marco wisely surrendered. Enzo Romano. Natalie waited. Then, the name connected. Her face emptied. Romano. Romano. The Romano hotels. Romano shipping. Romano restaurants. Romano properties. Romano family. And the other stories. The ones people told quietly. The ones nobody printed directly. The name that appeared whenever journalists used phrases like alleged connections and powerful organization. Natalie's gaze slowly traveled from Marco to the bodyguards to Enzo, the man whose face she had grabbed, the man she'd ordered to look obsessed with her, the man she'd told to smile better, the man she'd accused of getting carried away with fake dating. Her lips parted. Oh, Marco looked delighted again. Enzo crossed his arms. Natalie took one small step backward, then another. You're that Enzo Romano. Yes. Wonderful. She nodded. Excellent. A pause. Fantastic. Another. I need a drink. Enzo's eyes dropped toward her. You don't drink champagne. Natalie stopped. That tiny callback, that stupid little fact he'd noticed earlier, should not have made her want to smile right now. It did. She pointed at him. This is not the time to be observant. Marco laughed outright. Natalie looked at him. You knew? That he was Enzo Romano? Yes. Marco glanced toward Enzo. I had suspicions. She stared, then rubbed both hands over her face. Those same hands. Natalie froze, slowly lowered them, looked at Enzo. Oh my God. What? I squeezed your cheeks. Marco coughed. Enzo's eyes narrowed. Natalie was horrified all over again. In public, yes. Twice, yes. And told you to look obsessed with me, yes. Behind Enzo, a bodyguard suddenly developed a fascinating interest in the wall. Natalie closed her eyes. Can your organization erase memories? No. Shame. She turned, started walking. Enzo caught her hand. Natalie looked back. The humor in his expression had disappeared again. Where are you going? Back to my event. No. There it was. Boss voice. She pointed at his chest now. Not his face. Progress. My entire livelihood is in that ballroom. And whoever copied your credential may believe you're working with me. Natalie stopped. That wasn't funny. Enzo continued. If the man who ran saw us together earlier, her stomach tightened. He might think I gave you something. Yes. Or you gave me something. Yes. Natalie stared toward the ballroom doors. Suddenly Julian felt like a problem from another lifetime. She looked back. So what now? Enzo's answer came without hesitation. You stay close to me. Natalie's eyes narrowed. How close? Marco turned away already. Enzo looked at her. Natalie could practically see the response he wanted to give. She pointed. Behave. His eyebrow lifted. You grabbed me. We've established that. You wanted a boyfriend. For 30 seconds. Enzo looked at his watch. That deadline passed. Natalie stared. Marco completely lost his battle with laughter. And somehow, standing in a service corridor with a copied security badge. A mysterious drive, a vanished stranger, and several armed men. Natalie began laughing too, because apparently panic had reached maximum capacity and converted itself into comedy. She shook her head. This is insane. Enzo's gaze remained on her. Yes, I grabbed a stranger. Yes, pretended he was my boyfriend. Yes, and accidentally chose a Mafia boss. Another pause. Yes. Natalie looked toward the ceiling. Of course I did. Enzo's mouth finally curved. A real smile. Small, controlled. But there. Natalie caught it. Immediately. Her eyes widened. That. His smile vanished. That. His smile vanished. She pointed. That's the smile I wanted earlier. Marco made a sound between a laugh and a groan. Natalie looked triumphant. You can do it. Enzo stared at her. You're in danger. I know. And you're critiquing my smile. Both things can be true. Something changed in Enzo's eyes. Interest. Real interest. Not amusement anymore. Not completely. Natalie felt it, and for the first time that evening, she became nervous for a reason that had absolutely nothing to do with Julian. The copied badge, or mysterious men disappearing through service corridors, because Enzo Romano was looking at her now. Exactly the way she'd asked him to. Obsessed. Not yet. But curious? Absolutely. And Natalie Parker had no idea that those 30 ridiculous seconds beside the bar had just changed the entire direction of her life. She'd grabbed a stranger because she needed a fake boyfriend. She'd chosen him because he looked handsome, available, and inconveniently large. What she didn't know was that Enzo Romano had come to that gala looking for a traitor, that someone had already copied Natalie's access credential, that the man who escaped the service corridor had seen her standing in Enzo's arms, and that before the night was over, Enzo's enemies would begin asking the exact same question Natalie had asked only minutes earlier. Who, exactly, was Natalie Parker to Enzo Romano? The answer should have been simple. Nobody. A stranger. A curvy event coordinator, with terrible timing. A woman he'd known for less than an hour. But as Enzo looked down at her, while Natalie continued informing one of the city's most dangerous men that his smile required improvement, one problem became increasingly obvious. 30 seconds had already passed, and Enzo Romano wasn't ready to let his fake girlfriend go. Natalie Parker had spent most of her adult life believing she handled pressure well. Broken centerpiece? Fixed. Missing caterer? Replaced. Bride crying because the napkins looked emotionally beige? Handled. 200 guests arriving 40 minutes early because somebody printed the wrong time on an invitation? Natalie had survived that too. But apparently, standing in a service corridor beside Enzo Romano, while 4 armed men waited for instructions, was where her professional confidence finally decided to request annual leave. She looked down at the all-access credential hanging from her neck. Then at the identical access number Marco had pulled up on his phone. Same badge, same clearance. Used less than 15 minutes earlier. Impossible. Unless someone had copied it. Natalie immediately began thinking like an event coordinator again. That was safer than thinking about the fact that her fake boyfriend was apparently one of the most feared men in the city. She mentally reconstructed the day. Vendor arrival, credential distribution, lighting check, sound check, florists, catering, security, replacement badges. 1 temporary pass had malfunctioned around 5. 2 suppliers had arrived late. The printing station had remained unattended for approximately 7 minutes when Maya pulled her away to deal with a champagne tower attempting suicide. 7 minutes. Plenty of time. Natalie looked at Enzo. You need the credential printer. His expression sharpened. Why? Because the person who copied mine probably didn't photograph the card. She pointed to the numbers. The QR section changes every event. If they duplicated this accurately, they either accessed the registration software or used the printer itself. Marco was already messaging someone. Enzo watched Natalie. That look again. Not flirtation. Assessment. She recognized it, because wealthy clients often did the same thing when they realized the curvy woman holding a clipboard wasn't simply there to decorate the room. Natalie smiled. What? You're good. Her eyebrows rose. At my job? Yes. She placed one hand dramatically over her chest. Oh, thank God. I thought 6 years of experience had been a clerical error. Marco laughed. Enzo didn't, but his mouth considered it. Natalie saw. Naturally. Don't suppress it. What? The smile. I wasn't smiling. Your face lies badly. One guard suddenly looked toward the wall. Natalie was beginning to suspect Enzo's men were having the greatest evening of their careers, and that was dangerous. She pointed toward the ballroom. I need to go back. Enzo's expression changed instantly. No! There it was, the one syllable that probably moved entire corporations. Natalie stared. Excuse me? Whoever copied your pass may still be inside, and 200 guests are also inside. Not your problem. Natalie laughed. A single disbelieving sound. Enzo, those guests are very much my problem. You're in danger. The canapé station is also in danger. People are eating the decorative garnish. Marco looked away. Enzo stared at her. Natalie continued. And if I suddenly disappear from my own event, 30 minutes after being photographed, grabbing you like an emergency emotional support boyfriend, that will look suspicious. That was annoyingly logical. Enzo knew it. Natalie saw him know it. She smiled. Exactly. He exhaled. Fine. Natalie brightened. Excellent. You stay beside me. Her smile faded. Define beside. Within reach. Absolutely not. Natalie. Enzo. Marco turned toward the nearest guard. The guard turned toward Marco. Neither said anything. They didn't need to. Apparently, this was entertainment now. Natalie folded her arms. I cannot coordinate an event while attached to a 6'3" security problem. I am not a security problem. You have 4 armed men following you. 3. Natalie looked behind him. Marco lifted one hand. I don't count. You absolutely count. Emotionally, perhaps. Natalie smiled. Enzo looked toward him. Marco immediately stopped contributing. They compromised. Natalie could move around the ballroom, but Enzo stayed close. Very close. Unnecessarily handsome close, which became its own problem. The moment Natalie returned to the gala, Maya found her. Maya Reed had been Natalie's closest friend for 9 years, and therefore possessed the social restraint of someone who already knew every embarrassing thing Natalie had ever done. She hurried across the ballroom holding a camera. Her eyes went to Enzo, then Marco, then the guards, then back to Natalie. What did you do? Natalie smiled brightly. Networking. Maya stared. With organized crime. Natalie's smile disappeared. You know? Maya leaned closer. Natalie. Half the room knows who he is. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Natalie slowly looked over her shoulder. Enzo stood several feet away, speaking quietly to Marco. 2 businessmen nearby were pretending not to stare at him. She turned back to Maya. You watched me walk up to him. Yes. You watched me grab him. Yes. And you didn't stop me. I was curious. Natalie stared. Maya looked unapologetic. You looked committed. To death? To the bit. Natalie nearly strangled her with a centerpiece. Instead, she explained the copied credential. Maya's amusement disappeared. That was the thing Natalie loved about her. Comedy until it mattered, then serious. Maya had taken hundreds of photographs throughout setup. Vendor entrances, staff, decor. She might have accidentally captured whoever accessed the badge printer. They agreed to review the photographs later. Enzo had heard enough to understand. He gave Maya one approving nod. Maya stared at him, then at Natalie, then whispered, "He's hotter when he's terrifying." Natalie closed her eyes. "Go away." Maya went, slowly, still looking back. Traitor. For the next hour, Natalie's life became ridiculous. She checked table arrangements, with Enzo behind her. She corrected a waiter. With Enzo behind her, she dealt with an elderly donor demanding another chair, with Enzo standing close enough that the donor immediately decided his existing chair was perfect. That was useful. Natalie glanced at him. "You frightened an 80-year-old man." I stood here. Exactly. He looked mildly offended. Then Julian appeared again. Natalie saw him from across the room. Enzo noticed her expression change. He didn't need to ask. His hand settled lightly at the small of her back. Natalie froze. There was no tactical reason for the little movement. Julian was still far away. Nobody needed convincing yet. She looked up. Enzo continued watching the room, suspicious. Very suspicious. Julian approached, this time alone. He smiled. Natalie smiled back politely. Her body had already begun moving beyond him emotionally. That surprised her. Maybe all she'd needed after their breakup was perspective. Or possibly 6'3" perspective, wearing an expensive brown shirt. Julian asked whether Enzo would be attending the donor dinner next month. Natalie didn't know. Enzo answered, "If Natalie is." She turned. Oh, that was good. Too good. Julian's mouth tightened. Natalie resisted, smiling. Then he asked Enzo what he did. Dangerous question. Natalie's eyes widened. Enzo looked at him calmly. Logistics. Marco nearly walked into a waiter. Natalie pressed her lips together. Logistics. Sure. Technically accurate, in the same way a shark could be described as aquatic. Julian left shortly afterward. Natalie waited until he disappeared, then turned to Enzo. Logistics? Yes. You said that with a straight face. It is true. You have bodyguards. Occupational complication. You're impossible. His gaze lowered toward her. And yet, boyfriend material. Natalie forgot the next thing she intended to say. Marco made a choking noise behind them. Again. This family of men apparently needed medical evaluation. The real breakthrough came at 11:12. Natalie noticed a server crossing behind table 8. Nothing unusual. Except his wristband was green. Catering staff wore black. Florists wore green. The man carried a tray. Natalie stopped. Her eyes narrowed. Enzo saw immediately. What? She nodded subtly toward the server. Wrong wristband. Marco followed her gaze. He's carrying food. Exactly. Enzo's expression changed. Natalie watched the man move toward the private corridor. Wrong direction. Catering had no reason to use that hallway. Enzo's men moved without attracting attention. The man noticed, dropped the tray, ran. He disappeared through a service exit before they reached him, but something fell from his jacket. A second black drive. This one contained a short encrypted message. Only 3 readable words appeared on screen. Next event, 3 days. Natalie's stomach tightened. 3 days. She knew exactly what was happening in 3 days. The Bellamy Children's Foundation Gala. Another event she was coordinating. Enzo looked at her. Natalie looked back. No. His eyebrow rose. I know that face. What face? The one where you're about to tell me I'm not attending my own event. You're not. She laughed. Enzo remained serious. Natalie stopped laughing. Oh. You're serious? Yes. No. Natalie. Enzo. Marco slowly stepped away. He had clearly learned to evacuate early. Natalie planted both hands on her hips. I have spent 4 months planning that gala. Someone used tonight to move information through your access. Yes. And they're targeting the next one. Yes. So you don't go. Incorrect. Enzo stared. Natalie smiled sweetly. I go. You don't. I go. You're difficult. You met me this way. There. Finally, the corner of his mouth moved. Natalie pointed. Smile. It vanished. She laughed. The gala continued around them. Music. champagne, laughter, wealth. While two complete strangers stood in the middle of it, arguing like people who'd been together for years, and neither noticed how natural it already sounded. By midnight, Natalie's 30-second relationship had lasted nearly 3 hours. She finally stood near the grand entrance watching guests leave. Julian had gone. Camille had gone. The event was successful. Nobody had been murdered. Low standards, perhaps, but Natalie was tired. Enzo approached. She looked at him. Well, our relationship has reached its natural conclusion. His expression remained blank. Natalie held out her hand. What? Break up. You're shaking my hand. We had a beautiful 3 hours. Marco walked past and immediately slowed. Natalie ignored him. We should remember the good times. Enzo stared at her hand. She continued solemnly. The awkward introduction. The copied security credential. Your inability to smile correctly. Marco turned away. Enzo finally took Natalie's hand, but instead of shaking it, he lifted it slightly. His thumb brushed her knuckles. Natalie's breathing shifted. Not much. Enough. His voice lowered. 3 days. She looked up. The next gala. Yes. Natalie understood. The investigation wasn't over. Neither, apparently, was their relationship. She pulled her hand back before her heartbeat became publicly embarrassing. Fine. Enzo nodded. Fine. Natalie started walking away, then turned. One condition. His eyebrow rose. You need boyfriend training. For the first time, Enzo Romano actually looked offended. Marco laughed all the way to the car. The flowers arrived at Natalie Parker's apartment at 8 the next morning. Not a normal bouquet. No, that would have been reasonable. This arrangement required its own table. White roses, red ranunculus, greenery, a handwritten card. Natalie stared. Maya stood beside her drinking coffee. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Maya read the card. For credibility. ER. Natalie closed her eyes. No. Maya smiled. Oh, yes. This is ridiculous. This is romance. This is surveillance with petals. Maya took a photograph. Natalie tried calling Enzo. No answer. Naturally, she sent him a message. This is excessive. His reply came 2 minutes later. You said Julian follows your social media. Natalie stared. Maya leaned over. Smart. Natalie typed. He's not hiding inside my apartment. Enzo replied. Are you sure? Natalie looked around dramatically. Maya laughed. Then the doorbell rang. Coffee. Her exact order. Natalie stared at the cup. Maya looked impressed. Your fake boyfriend is outperforming several real men I've dated. Natalie hated that this was true. She messaged Enzo again. Coffee too? Credibility. You're enjoying this. No reply. Suspicious. Very suspicious. That afternoon, Enzo arrived at Natalie's event office. Without warning, Natalie's 4 employees went silent. Maya smiled immediately. Natalie looked up from her laptop. Why are you here? Training. She blinked. He remembered. Wonderful. She stood. Fine. Enzo looked around. Where? Natalie pointed toward the meeting room. Classroom. Marco appeared behind him. Natalie smiled. You too. Marco's eyes lit up. Enzo looked betrayed. 10 minutes later, Natalie stood in front of a whiteboard. At the top, she'd written, How to look like a normal boyfriend. Enzo stared. Marco sat at the conference table, enjoying the greatest afternoon of his life. Natalie began. Rule 1. Stop scanning every room like someone owes him money. Enzo said, People usually did. Natalie ignored that. Rule 2. Occasional smiling. Not too much. That would look suspicious. But something, she demonstrated. Enzo tried. Natalie stared. No. His expression flattened. That looks threatening. I smiled. You looked like you knew where the body was. Marco put his head down. Enzo looked toward him. Marco shook his head. Nothing. Natalie stepped closer. Relax your face. It is relaxed. This is your relaxed face? Yes. Oh dear. Enzo stared. Natalie lifted both hands toward his cheeks, then stopped. Their first meeting flashed through her mind. She slowly lowered them. Enzo noticed. Something warm flickered between them. Natalie cleared her throat. Rule 3. Hand-holding. She held out her hand. Enzo looked at it, then at her. Take it. He did. Too formally. She sighed. You're not signing a treaty. How should I hold your hand? Normally. That is not an instruction. Natalie stepped closer, adjusted his fingers, interlaced them with hers, and the joke disappeared. Just for a moment. His hand was warm, large around hers. His thumb rested naturally against her skin. Natalie's eyes lifted. Enzo was already watching her. Neither spoke. Marco watched, then very slowly reached for his phone. Enzo looked at him. Marco put the phone down. Natalie pulled her hand away. Good. Her voice sounded suspiciously breathless. Enzo's mouth moved. She pointed at him. Don't. Didn't say anything. Your face did. Now Marco openly laughed. The next gala arrived 3 days later. This time, Natalie knew Enzo was coming. That should have made things easier. It did not, because when he entered, he had listened to her. No full black suit, dark trousers, deep charcoal shirt, sleeves rolled slightly, no tie. Natalie looked at him, then looked again. Maya appeared beside her. Oh, that's rude. Natalie didn't ask what she meant. She knew. Enzo crossed the room. His eyes found Natalie immediately. She wore an emerald green gown that hugged her curves beautifully. He stopped for half a second. Natalie noticed. Excellent. Remember your training. His gaze moved over her. I remember. Smile. He did. Natalie's pulse betrayed her. Much better. Maybe too much better. She cleared her throat. That'll do. Enzo leaned closer. You're staring. No. You are. Natalie looked away. Maya was already leaving, because apparently friendship included abandoning people at critical moments. Julian appeared again, because life had a sense of humor. This time, Enzo saw him first. Natalie saw Enzo see him. That was even better. Julian greeted them, polite, smooth, then told Natalie she looked beautiful. Enzo's jaw tightened, tiny. Natalie almost smiled. After Julian left, she waited. Enzo said nothing. She waited longer. Finally, jealous. No. Natalie, your jaw did the walnut thing. He stared. What walnut thing? The thing where it looks like your jaw is attempting to crack one. That is not a thing. It absolutely is. She leaned closer. Oh, you don't like him. He had you. Natalie blinked. And lost you. Her teasing disappeared. Enzo looked toward Julian across the room. I dislike inefficiency. Natalie's brain stalled. That was either one of the strangest compliments she'd ever received, or one of the best. She smiled despite herself. Enzo saw, and this time, he smiled too. Correctly. Damn him. The investigation advanced during dinner. Natalie noticed one centerpiece had been moved. Table 12's arrangement now sat on table 8. Most people wouldn't care. Natalie cared deeply. No. Enzo looked at her. What? The flowers. He glanced toward the table. They look fine. Natalie's expression turned offended. That isn't the point. Marco sighed softly. He was beginning to understand. Event planners were more dangerous than expected. Natalie approached. The arrangements were nearly identical. But Table 12's arrangement used a slightly different vase, because the original had broken during setup. Someone had switched them. Why? Natalie lifted the centerpiece. Something clicked beneath it. A tiny black drive. Enzo's expression sharpened. Marco immediately moved. Natalie looked at Enzo. He looked at her. She smiled. Clipboard. He frowned. What? You have bodyguards. She lifted the drive. I have flowers. Enzo stared. Then laughed. Actually laughed. Short, quiet, but real. Natalie's eyes widened. Marco stopped walking. Two guards looked around as though something had exploded. Natalie pointed. That. Enzo's expression flattened. Too late. She smiled triumphantly. I fixed you. You did not. I absolutely did. The second drive contained partial vendor data and one repeated company. Venti Logistics. Carlo Venti. One of Enzo's most trusted directors. The name meant nothing to Natalie. To Enzo, it meant everything. And suddenly, the investigation became personal. Natalie's apartment was broken into the following night. She knew, immediately, nothing dramatic. The door wasn't destroyed, no furniture overturned, no obvious theft. But Natalie noticed details. The ceramic bowl by the entrance sat 2 inches left of where she always placed it. Her desk drawer was open. Her filing cabinet had been searched, and every physical folder related to Romano-associated events was gone. Laptop untouched. Jewelry untouched. Cash untouched. Someone had wanted paper. Natalie stood in the doorway, very still, then called Enzo. He arrived in 12 minutes. 12. Natalie lived 20 minutes from his estate. She decided not to calculate. Enzo entered first. Marco behind him. Security checked every room. Natalie remained near the entrance, arms folded tightly. Enzo came back. You're leaving. Normally, that tone would have started an argument. Tonight, Natalie didn't have one ready. That told Enzo more than words. He softened. Hotel. Secure apartment. My house. Natalie looked at him. My choice? Yes. There. No demand. No command. Choice, she thought. Hotel meant unfamiliar staff. Secure apartment meant sitting alone somewhere anonymous. Enzo's estate meant Enzo. That should not have been the deciding factor. Unfortunately, it was. Your house. He nodded once. No smugness. Natalie appreciated that. Then she pointed. Temporary. Of course. Marco looked away. Natalie caught him. What? Nothing. Your face said something. My face supports temporary arrangements. She narrowed her eyes. Enzo told him to carry a suitcase. Marco's smile disappeared. Justice. Enzo Romano's estate was beautiful. Quiet. Elegant. Terrifyingly organized. Natalie entered the kitchen, opened a cabinet, and discovered no snacks. She turned toward Enzo. What is this? He looked around. A kitchen. No. She opened another cabinet. Where are the emergency crackers? The what? Emergency crackers. I don't know what that means. Natalie looked horrified. You've been living like this? Enzo glanced toward Marco. Marco shrugged. Within 24 hours, Natalie had bought enough snacks to destabilize the pantry. Enzo returned from a meeting and found 3 of his bodyguards eating chips. He looked toward Natalie. She smiled. Morale. You corrupted them. They were hungry. They have food. They had almonds. Those are food. That's a punishment. Marco nearly applauded. Living together created problems. Several. Natalie discovered Enzo owned 12 dark shirts. She lined 6 across his bed. He entered. Stopped. What are you doing? Investigation. Of. Your relationship with brown, black, and charcoal. They're different. She stared at the shirts. Where? He began explaining fabric. Natalie listened seriously, then shook her head. Emotional support shirts. Enzo looked offended. She smiled. That night, he found one missing. Natalie wore it over leggings. Enzo stopped in the hallway. She looked down. What? His shirt reached mid-thigh. She looked extremely comfortable. Too comfortable. His gaze moved slowly upward. Natalie smiled. You have 11. He said nothing. She walked past. Then glanced back. You're staring. No. Your face lies badly. Enzo remained still, long after she'd disappeared around the corner. Marco saw him. Said nothing. For once, self-preservation remained alive. The The domestic rhythm became dangerously easy. Natalie worked from Enzo's library. He worked from his study. They ate dinner together. Sometimes Marco joined. Sometimes Maya arrived and turned everything into chaos. Natalie stole Enzo's coffee, then complained it tasted terrible. He began ordering her preferred coffee anyway. She noticed, did not comment. One evening, Natalie fell asleep on the sofa, surrounded by guest lists. Enzo came downstairs after midnight. He found her curled beneath one arm, glasses slipping down her nose, pencil still in her hand. He removed the pencil, covered her with a blanket. Natalie opened one eye, caught him. Enzo froze. She smiled sleepily. Credibility. His expression changed. Yes. She closed her eyes again. Terrible excuse. He remained beside her for several seconds, then whispered, "I know." Natalie heard. She pretended not to. The jealousy problem became undeniable the following morning. Maya brought a photographer named Daniel to review gala images. Daniel was friendly, handsome, very tactile. He hugged Natalie when he arrived. Enzo appeared in the doorway almost immediately. Natalie saw him. Maya saw him. Daniel did not. Poor man. Enzo stood there, silent, watching. Natalie smiled. This was going to be enjoyable. Daniel complimented Natalie's event. She thanked him. Enzo entered the room. No reason. None. Natalie looked up. Need something? No. He remained. Maya stared at Natalie. Natalie stared at Maya. Both understood. Daniel continued talking. Enzo continued existing aggressively. Eventually, Daniel left. Natalie waited until the door closed, then turned. Business. Enzo looked at her. Yes. What business? Silence. Natalie smiled. Oh. His jaw tightened. There is no O. There is an enormous OH. Maya quietly backed toward the door. Natalie leaned against the desk. Jealous? No. You came in here because Daniel hugged me. I came in because... He stopped. Natalie waited. No excuse appeared. She smiled wider. Enzo looked deeply annoyed by language. Adorable. His eyes narrowed. Don't. You're jealous.
I'm not.
Your ears are red. They are not. Maya opened the door. They are. Then fled. Natalie laughed so hard she had to sit down. Enzo stared at the closed door. Apparently everyone around him had become treacherous. And worse, he couldn't remember the last time he'd enjoyed betrayal this much. The third event was smaller. Private dinner. 80 guests. Luxury hotel ballroom. Enzo and Natalie were supposed to look distracted, happy, romantic, unconcerned with the investigation. That became increasingly easy. Too easy. Natalie stood beside him during cocktails. His hand rested at her waist without discussion. She leaned toward him naturally. He remembered which sparkling water she preferred. She adjusted his collar without realizing she'd done it. Marco noticed. Maya noticed. Everyone with functional eyesight noticed. Natalie and Enzo, apparently, did not. Then music began. Couples moved toward the dance floor. Natalie looked at Enzo. No, he raised an eyebrow. I know that expression. You dance. No, you absolutely dance. How do you know? You stand like a man whose mother forced lessons on him. Enzo looked offended by the accuracy. Natalie held out her hand. Credibility. He stared. She smiled. He took it. And then, completely betrayed expectations. Enzo Romano could dance. Properly. Smoothly. Confidently. Natalie stared up at him. This is unfair. What? You already have too many skills. His hand settled against her back. Such as intimidation, logistics. She emphasized the word. Unnecessarily good shirts. His eyebrow lifted. And now this. Enzo guided her around another couple. Natalie's dress moved around her legs. For once, neither joked. His gaze stayed on hers. The ballroom blurred slightly around them. Natalie's hand rested against his shoulder. She felt his thumb move once against her back. Then he said, "You look beautiful." No sarcasm, no cover story tone, no witnesses required. Natalie's next step went wrong. Enzo caught her. She glared. That was sabotage. His mouth curved. "You forgot how to walk. You said something distracting. Should I apologize?" "No." A pause. "Say it again." He did, and Natalie smiled. Later, she overheard two of Enzo's men speaking near the service entrance. They didn't know she was nearby. One mentioned keeping Parker close until Carlo's connection was proven. Another agreed she remained their best access point into the event network. Natalie stopped. The words weren't cruel. They weren't even wrong. But something inside her sank. Access point. Useful. Keep her close. Of course. This had begun because Enzo needed her access. Her knowledge. Her events. Maybe everything after that. Flowers. Coffee. Jealousy. The estate. The dancing was simply blurred strategy. Natalie hated that the possibility hurt, so she did what competent adults often did when feelings became frightening. She became very professional. The difference was immediate. No teasing. No stolen coffee. No touching Enzo's arm. No boyfriend training. No jokes about his shirts. Enzo noticed before dinner. By bedtime, he was irritated. By breakfast, he looked ready to interrogate somebody. Natalie sat across the table checking emails. Enzo watched. She didn't comment on his black shirt. Problem. She didn't steal his coffee. Bigger problem. She didn't point out that he was staring. Catastrophe. Finally. What happened? Natalie looked up. Nothing. He knew that was false. She knew he knew. Neither moved. Natalie returned to her phone. Enzo stared. Being ignored by Natalie was considerably worse than being insulted by her. He discovered this with unpleasant speed. The reason finally surfaced at the next event. Julian attended. Again. This man had remarkable scheduling. He cornered Natalie near a donor table and made a comment disguised as concern. People were talking. Her sudden connection to Enzo looked convenient. Perhaps she should be careful. People didn't think she was using him for status. Natalie's face became still. Old wound. Same weapon. Julian had spent years subtly suggesting Natalie's career existed because she was charming, not because she was good. Before she could respond, Enzo appeared. Natalie immediately touched his arm. No. He looked down. She knew exactly what he could do. One phone call. One quiet word. Julian's business opportunities could evaporate. Natalie didn't want that. She didn't need Enzo to destroy somebody every time she was insulted. Enzo understood. Then did something better. A major donor approached moments later and complimented the event. Enzo turned toward Natalie and publicly explained that the entire operation succeeded because of her planning, her attention to detail, her ability to notice failures before they became disasters. He didn't call her beautiful, didn't mention their supposed relationship, didn't reduce her to the woman beside him. He praised her work. Natalie looked at him. Julian heard. So did several important clients. That meant more than any threat could have. Later, she found Enzo alone on the balcony. He asked again, "What happened?" This time Natalie answered. She told him what she'd overheard. "Keep Parker close. Useful access point." Enzo listened, then nodded. "You are useful." Natalie's eyes narrowed. "Wrong beginning," he continued. "Extremely. Worse." She folded her arms. Enzo's mouth almost curved. Then he stepped closer. "But that's not why I sent flowers." Natalie stopped. "Or coffee." Another step. "Or why Daniel irritated me." She tried not to smile. Failed slightly. Enzo looked at her. "And it isn't why I want you in my house." Her heartbeat changed. There it was. No strategy. No fake relationship, just truth. Natalie's voice softened. "So you were jealous." Enzo closed his eyes. She smiled. He opened them. That is what you took from that. Important detail. He laughed once. Natalie stepped closer. Their faces were inches apart. No ex-boyfriend. No audience. No credibility. Enzo's hand touched her waist. Natalie didn't stop him. He leaned closer. Then, the balcony door opened. Marco stepped outside. Stopped. Closed his eyes. Natalie looked toward the sky. No. Marco immediately backed away. I didn't see anything. You always see something. I can return in 10 minutes. 20. Enzo looked at her. Natalie froze. Marco's eyebrows went up. She pointed toward him. Out! He disappeared. Enzo looked amused. Natalie sighed. Doors are my enemy. Then his phone rang. Of course. Apparently architecture and telecommunications were working together. But the call mattered. They finally had enough evidence to test Carlo, and Natalie knew exactly how. Natalie's plan was simple, which meant Enzo immediately distrusted it. They would give Carlo an Oz Aldid version of the final event logistics. Wrong entrance, wrong courier time, wrong private room. Then Natalie would quietly change everything legitimate. If someone still appeared at the old location, the leak came from somebody who had received Carlo's copy. Only 5 people would. Carlo among them. Enzo listened. Marco listened. Then looked at Natalie. That's terrifying. She smiled. Thank you, Enzo agreed. Natalie changed the event without alerting the outer vendor network. New florist entrance, new service elevator, new delivery sequence, different room numbers. She enjoyed this far too much. Enzo watched her work. At one point, she moved 3 place cards. He asked why. Because Mr. Harrington hates Mr. Bell. That matters. More than bullets at dinner. Marco nodded solemnly. He had learned. The trap worked. At 8:17, a courier entered through the OLD West service door, exactly as the fake schedule instructed. Enzo's men intercepted him. The courier carried payment records and encrypted shipping data, all connected to Carlo. But Carlo had prepared for exposure. Within minutes, documents appeared implicating Natalie. Access logs, vendor approvals, credential records. For a moment, the evidence looked convincing. Marco's face tightened. Enzo didn't look at Natalie with suspicion. Not once. That mattered. Carlo stood across the service office, pretending shock. He suggested Natalie may have been exploiting her relationship with Enzo. Natalie almost laughed. Almost. Then she examined the records. One line. 8:17 p.m. Ballroom C. Her supposed badge access. Natalie smiled. Carlo noticed. Bad sign. She looked up. I wasn't in Ballroom C. Carlo claimed the system disagreed. Natalie nodded. 300 people disagree with the system. At 8:17, Natalie had been on stage, introducing the charity auction. Photographs, video, live stream. Witnesses. Impossible to fake. Carlo's expression changed. Tiny. Natalie wasn't finished. The fraudulent records used her OLD credential prefix. She had changed the event code format 4 months earlier, after another coordinator kept confusing temporary vendors with management passes. Carlo hadn't known. Because he didn't plan events. He stole logistics. Different skill. Then Natalie pointed toward the floral invoices. Every compromised event included one altered supplier code. Same code. Inserted after Natalie's final approval. Only one operations account had access. Carlo Venti. Silence. Enzo looked at Carlo. No shouting, no dramatic fury. Somehow, that was more frightening. Carlo tried blaming Natalie. Said Enzo had become distracted, too invested, too emotional, that she had made him careless. Enzo glanced toward Natalie. She stood in her burgundy dress holding a folder, completely composed. The same woman who had grabbed his face without knowing his name. Then he looked back at Carlo. She didn't make me careless. A pause. She made me pay attention. Natalie's chest tightened. Carlo had nothing left. He was removed. The conspiracy unraveled quickly after that. Payments, messages, vendor transfers, shipping leaks. Everything. Enzo's organization had finally found its traitor, and an event planner with an unhealthy attachment to correct table assignments had broken the case. Later, the ballroom had emptied. Natalie stood alone near the flowers. Exhausted, Enzo approached. No guards. No Marco. For once, just him. The investigation was finished. She looked up. So, we're done. His face changed. Natalie clarified quickly. The fake relationship. Enzo said nothing. She tried smiling. No more credibility. Nothing. No more pretending. His gaze remained on her. Natalie's smile faded. This was suddenly terrifying, far more than Carlo, because pretending had given them an excuse. Now there wasn't one. She looked down. What happens now? Enzo stepped closer. Natalie looked up. He answered quietly. Whatever you choose. Of course. Choice. Again. He didn't claim her. Didn't tell her everything they'd done meant she owed him something. He simply waited. Natalie studied him. The intimidating stranger from the first gala. The man she'd grabbed because she was afraid of looking alone. The man who'd noticed she hated champagne. Who'd sent flowers under a ridiculous excuse. Who'd let her invade his pantry. Who'd become jealous of a photographer and denied it catastrophically. Natalie smiled. Then put both hands against his face. Again. Enzo froze. Recognition appeared immediately. She whispered, "Act like my boyfriend." His hands settled around her waist. Again? Natalie smiled. This time, don't act. And finally, Enzo kissed her. No investigation, no ex, no performance, just a slow, warm kiss in an empty ballroom while white flowers surrounded them, and Natalie discovered that apparently her terrible decision-making had occasionally useful consequences. Then applause came from the doorway. Natalie broke the kiss. Marco, Maya, both standing there. Maya held a camera. Natalie pointed. "Delete it!" Maya ran. Marco followed. Enzo laughed. Natalie stared. "Your friends are terrible. They're not my friends. You've been saying that for weeks." "They've become worse." Natalie smiled. So had his life. And somehow, he loved it. 3 months later, Natalie Parker had several problems. Good problems. Her event company had become busier than ever. 2 major clients had referred her after the charity investigation. Her apartment had been repaired. Her pantry was still normal. Enzo's pantry was not. She had permanently corrupted it. His guards now knew where the emergency chocolate lived. Marco had developed an addiction to Natalie's caramel popcorn. Enzo considered this an organizational weakness. Natalie considered it community. And somehow, the fake relationship had become extremely real. No announcement. No dramatic contract. No absurd billionaire arrangement. Enzo simply kept showing up. Dinner, coffee, Sunday afternoons, late-night work sessions. Natalie attended his events. He attended hers. Sometimes he stood near the back and watched her work. Natalie loved that. He never interrupted, never treated her career like something secondary to his life. When she had a late event, he waited. When she needed space, he gave it. When she needed help, he asked before giving it. That mattered more than flowers, although the flowers continued. Natalie had stopped complaining, mostly. Enzo also developed an unfortunate interest in romantic comedies. He denied this accusation, strongly. The evidence was overwhelming. One night, Natalie fell asleep halfway through a terrible movie. When she woke at 2 in the morning, Enzo was still watching. The ending. Alone. She sat up. "You care." He looked at the television. "No. You stayed awake. I wanted to know how it ended." "You care." The plot was unresolved. Natalie grinned. The following morning, she told Marco. Enzo found out. The betrayal nearly ended international diplomacy. Natalie also stole his shirts. constantly. Enzo complained, not sincerely. One morning she walked into breakfast wearing his dark brown shirt over leggings. Marco stopped eating, looked at Enzo, then at Natalie, then decided the ceiling was safest. Natalie stole toast from Enzo's plate. He stared. What? That was mine. You own several hotels. That doesn't replace toast. She took another bite. Capitalism has failed you. Enzo shook his head, then kissed her forehead. Marco nearly smiled himself unconscious. This was what nobody expected. Not Enzo becoming weak. He didn't. Not Natalie becoming obedient. Absolutely not. They simply became softer with each other, without either becoming smaller. Then came another gala. Huge, elegant, bright chandeliers, white flowers, champagne. The kind of room where their story had begun. Natalie had been coordinating it for 5 weeks. Everything was running perfectly. At 9:15, Enzo arrived. Dark brown shirt, black trousers, watch. Marco and 2 guards behind him. Natalie saw him from across the ballroom and stopped. The memory hit instantly. Julian, panic, 30 seconds. The stranger by the bar, both hands on his face. Look obsessed with me. Natalie smiled. Maya, standing nearby with her camera, saw the expression. No. Natalie looked at her. What? I know that face. You know nothing. You're about to cause a problem. Natalie handed her clipboard over. Hold this. Maya closed her eyes. Definitely a problem. Natalie walked across the ballroom. Enzo watched her coming. Marco watched too. His smile appeared immediately. He remembered. Of course he did. Natalie stopped directly in front of Enzo. He looked down. Suspicious. Hello? Hello? She lifted both hands. Marco whispered behind him. Oh no. Natalie grabbed Enzo's face. Exactly like the first night. 2 guards immediately turned away to hide smiles. Enzo stared down at her. Natalie leaned closer and whispered, I need you to act like my boyfriend. Silence. Marco made the exact choking noise from months earlier. Natalie nearly laughed. Enzo didn't. At first, his hands settled slowly around her waist. He looked into her eyes, then said, I thought I was applying for husband. Natalie stopped. Everything stopped. Her hands remained against his face. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Behind Enzo, Marco's eyes became enormous. One guard covered his mouth. The other one actually whispered, Boss? Full circle. Natalie stared. For once, she had absolutely no comeback. Enzo's expression became very pleased. You're quiet. She narrowed her eyes. I'm processing. Take your time. That sounded like a proposal. It wasn't. Natalie blinked. What? Not yet. Her eyes widened. Not yet. Enzo smiled. A real smile now. The smile she'd spent weeks insisting existed somewhere beneath all that intimidating facial architecture. Natalie stared. Enzo Romano, you cannot casually threaten marriage at my event. It wasn't a threat. It had warning characteristics. Marco laughed. Natalie pointed around Enzo at him. Stay out of this. Marco raised both hands. Enzo leaned closer. When I ask, Natalie looked back at him. You won't need Julian walking toward you. Her expression softened. You won't need a cover story. His hand moved gently against her waist. And you won't need 30 seconds. Natalie's heart squeezed. There he was. Dry. Controlled. Completely sincere underneath it. She touched his cheek. This time gently. Good. Enzo's eyebrow rose. Good? I'll probably need at least 45. He laughed. Natalie smiled, then kissed him. Right there, in the middle of the ballroom. Guests noticed. Maya photographed everything despite previously being threatened. Marco applauded. The guards no longer looked shocked. They'd become accustomed to their boss being grabbed, corrected, teased and kissed by Natalie Parker. That was probably the strangest organizational adjustment of the year. Later that night, Natalie and Enzo stood outside beneath the lights of the venue. Her heels hurt. His tie, because Natalie had finally convinced him to wear one, had been loosened. She leaned against him. Enzo looked down. "Did you enjoy yourself?" "Yes." "Good." Natalie thought about the first night. She'd grabbed him because Julian made her feel as though being alone meant she'd lost. That felt ridiculous now, because the best thing Enzo ever did wasn't helping her make Julian jealous. It was helping Natalie realize she had never needed Julian's approval in the first place. And Enzo, he'd walked into that first gala looking for betrayal, looking for danger, watching everyone around him. Then a curvy woman he'd never met walked straight through his security, grabbed his face, and ordered him to love her convincingly for 30 seconds. He should have walked away. Instead, he became curious, then amused, then protective, then jealous, then hopelessly, completely, genuinely in love. Natalie looked up. "What?" Enzo frowned. "You're staring." She smiled. "Just thinking. Dangerous. Very." She lifted one finger toward his chest. Enzo immediately caught it. "No," Natalie gasped. "You've developed reflexes. Necessary. Rude." He kissed her finger. That ruined the joke. Her face softened. Enzo looked satisfied. Natalie narrowed her eyes. "You did that deliberately." "Yes." Progress. The man finally admitted things. She rested her head against his chest and laughed quietly. Because all those months ago, Natalie Parker had thought she needed a stranger to pretend he wanted her. She'd chosen Enzo Romano almost randomly. Tall, handsome, available, convenient. Worst possible selection criteria for a fake boyfriend. Best accident of her life. Because by the time their first 30 seconds ended, Enzo had already begun paying attention. And by the time the danger disappeared, neither of them wanted the pretending to end. Natalie looked up at him. One question. Enzo waited. "When you actually propose?" His eyebrow lifted. "Yes?" She smiled. "Marco cannot be there." From several feet away, Marco called out that he could hear them. Natalie groaned. Enzo laughed. And once again, the most feared man at the party looked nothing like the cold stranger Natalie had grabbed months earlier. Which was exactly the problem. She had asked him to look obsessed. Somewhere along the way, Enzo Romano had taken the assignment far too seriously, and Natalie Parker had absolutely no intention of correcting him.